How many of you played The Sims and had something unexpected happen? Perhaps even a sim dying unexpectedly? Now let's get personal here. Did you remove the pool ladder? Or did you ever feed a sim to a carnivorous cow plant? Well, I'm afraid to say that these kinds of unfortunate deaths may not make it into Life by You, according to what Rod Humble said in an interview. My name is Michael, and welcome back to Sovereign Gaming, where today we will be discussing something kind of shocking to the Simmer community that was revealed in Sports Illustrated Gaming's interview with Rod Humble, that unfortunate deaths may not make the game. But before I share some of my thoughts on this, let's read out the quote from the article together. Life by You is the next life sim by one of the visionaries behind The Sims. It features an open world and enough customization options to make your head spin. But there's one thing that doesn't feature: death by sickness or unfortunate means. We actually removed all of that due to the event in 2020, Paradox Tectonic boss Rod Humble explains. So we had the idea of sickness and death by unfortunate means, but it just didn't really sit right, and it's not that game. The game doesn't come with any violence in it. It does come with nudity and romantic relationships, and that's really more about the emphasis of that kind of storytelling, the important stuff. I think that there are a lot of games out there that already do violence and the dark side a lot better. We're also life sim, and you can make grandma and your family. We don't want people to see horrible things happen to grandma. That's not cool. So yeah, we've tried to make it as nice as we can. Based on myself interpreting this as there being no deaths by fire, starvation, thirst, drowning, or otherwise, I have to say that I'm not impressed with reading this. For me, death is a natural part of life, and that includes accidental deaths, or deaths that you totally didn't intend. I mean, how many funny stories do each of us have when it comes to playing our Sims games where an accidental death occurs? Like, it's not that serious. It's just a life simulation game, in my opinion. To speak to another perspective on this, unfortunate or unexpected deaths also have a significant impact on the storytelling of your simulated human. Death changes people, either for better or for worse, and these stories are some that are the most impactful to tell. In that sense, I feel that not including unfortunate deaths is actually deferring away from realism. I would also go as far to say that there seems to be no consequences for getting your Life by You human to run through a fire or swim through an ocean for 3 days, or not feeding them for a month. And this too is also unrealistic as well. And I challenge Rod Humble and the team to consider if these circumstances are not more harrowing or violent than ending these simulated agents' life with a consequential death. For a game that has captured the attention of the gargantuan Simmer community, leaving out unexpected or unfortunate deaths was certainly one feature that I wasn't expecting to be left out. I also think that citing the reasons behind the decision, and that a certain event in 2020 led to this decision, is a pretty weak reason to deny players a very realistic part of life, and that is death, whether it comes from old age or otherwise. I get that they don't want to have a game focused on violence, and I also totally get that they put a large amount of bonding tools in the hands of the players. So I do think that even if the final game doesn't release with accidental or unfortunate deaths, that players will be able to add them into the game. With that said, Rod Humble and the Paradox team can certainly assert their stance on no violence, while also handling unfortunate deaths in a graceful way. One thing to also keep in mind is that the early access version of the game is coming out on September 12th, at the time that I am publishing this video. Well, a lot can change from now until then, and even more is likely to change from the time of the early release access to the final published version. But I will make a prediction that if it is difficult to mod in accidental deaths in the first release, that players are going to demand this change for the final published version. Accidental and unfortunate deaths have been a part of the life simulation games since the beginning, and there are entire videos and channels out there dedicated to playing their life simulation games, knowing that things can go wrong and that there is a certain risk involved with certain playstyles. Specifically, I am talking about doing challenges like the 100 Baby Challenge. One of the risks there is cooking for a large family and having to mitigate fire deaths with the amount of food you actually have to make. Or perhaps another risk with that challenge is accidentally starving a sim. I still think that you can emphasize the positive aspects of storytelling without taking away some of the risks and consequences involved when playing more recklessly. And that's where I feel that Life by You is missing out on here. It's taken itself a little too seriously with this approach. I feel that this video is very necessary to make at this time because it outlines something that is slightly alarming to me, and that is the more serious approach on eliminating accidental deaths because it is perceived as too violent, as opposed to viewing it as a storytelling element that can be handled gracefully. Like I mentioned before, accidental and unfortunate deaths are a part of life. And as opposed to taking the stance that they shouldn't exist because they are quote-unquote too violent, I'm a little disappointed to see Paradox taking the stance that they must be eliminated and denied to the player, as opposed to being handled with care and compassion. This leads me to wonder how Life by You modders will be able to customize this, because to customize a death, you need to have a script that actually unalives the human, and then you need the animations to go along with it. I say this to convey that I personally don't think that creating custom deaths is an easy mod to make, even with the modding tools handed with the game, but that's just my opinion, and feel free to chime in and correct me if you are a modder who has done this in the past for other life simulation games. And what about ghosts? Wouldn't the haunting of a loved one be considered violent as well, since seeing a ghost could bring up the emotional trauma surrounding their death? It's a slippery slope, and I feel that if Life by You didn't take itself so seriously with this non-violence approach, that it could certainly deliver the best of both worlds, being a way to include unfortunate deaths and also to add a graceful touch to it as well. And I also think that the community will demand it after the first release is published in September without those unfortunate deaths. But I want to hear what you think about the possibility of accidental and unfortunate deaths not being added in Life by You. Do you think that unfortunate deaths are a necessary natural part of storytelling? And if so, what would you advise Rod Humble and the Paradox team to do in order to handle unfortunate deaths with grace? Feel free to comment below with your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe and like for more videos like this one. I just want to thank you again for watching, and I am super interested to hear what you have to think about accidental and unfortunate deaths likely not being included in the upcoming Life by You game.